introduce our panelists. I think we're in for a really engaging discussion this evening. And before I do that, just like to make a brief programming note. We discussed this earlier, and I think we're going to take questions throughout the course of our conversation this evening as opposed to sticking them all on the end. So if you have a question as we're discussing these various issues, please just get my attention and I will recognize you and we'll go through that process. So without further ado, let me introduce Jeff Kagan. Jeff's a wireless analyst that's been following the spectrum of communications technologies, including wireless, telecom, internet, cable TV, and IPTV for about 30 years now. Now, Jeff's frequently quoted in a number of publications, but I'm going to put a plug in here. You can see Jeff's work every week on rcrwireless.com. While you're checking it out, subscribe to our newsletter, please. And so Jeff has also been a judge at the CTIA Awards program at Super Mobility Week, I think, since 2012. So please welcome Jeff Kagan. Now, Mr. Perry Walter, the Managing Director at HDH Advisors, LLC. Perry has extensive experience in providing a wide variety of valuation services for purposes of financial reporting, tax planning, dissenting shareholder and other litigation, contemplated mergers and acquisitions, and general business planning. Prior to his role at HDH, Perry worked in roles for over 25 years in equity research and business valuation. So let's hear it for Perry. Last but not least, we have Jorge Fuenzalida, who's the VP and General Manager at Incode Consulting. As VP GM, Jorge leads Incode, which is the strategy consulting branch at Ericsson. He has 25 years experience developing strategies, technologies, and solutions for carriers, MSOs, and PE firms. So let's hear it for Jorge. So, you know, as all of you know, wireless is changing very rapidly, perhaps right now more rapidly than ever. We have the Internet of Things burgeoning and the promise of 5G maybe 5-10 years from now. And, you know, all these things are going to fundamentally transform the way we all live, work, and do our business. So it's really a privilege to get to discuss these issues with you gentlemen this evening. So as we get started and consider all of these transformative properties, we get focused on the technology end, but I think something that's very important to keep in mind is how business models are going to have to transform as these new technologies come online. So, Jorge, as we get started here, could you introduce yourself, make a few introductory comments, and then tell me how you see these business models changing over the next few years?
Sure. Well, thanks. And I guess I'm no stranger to this group. I see a lot of familiar faces out there and even former panelists. But Jorge Fuenzalida with Incode Consulting. I've been here in Atlanta for about 23 years, originally from Washington, D.C., and I've been serving the broader industry for most of that career in both consulting roles as well as working at Bell South and doing some startup work. So just real quickly, a couple topics that we do a top 10 prediction list each year. We'll launch it on January 1st. I've used this forum to sort of introduce a couple preview themes of that, so we can get further into it as we have the discussion. So I'll be real brief on this. The first one is we believe the 600 auction will not receive the attention that maybe others see at this point. So 600 megahertz auction, the incentive auction is coming out early next year. The second is consolidation. Consolidation's back. And it won't be wireless to wireless or fixed line to fixed line. Of course, you've seen a real wave of cable consolidation, but we see potentially one of the major fixed line oriented companies, i.e. a cable company, marrying up with a wireless company. Third prediction is about video, and of course mobile and media are coming together. So even though this is video, it's very much tied to mobile. And what does it take to be successful in video? And it's discovery, it's marrying in a very smart fashion the supply and demand around content, and then it's having, or you can own content itself. So around discovery, we see a lot of advancements in that will go from today's TV everywhere or set-top box model to something that's much more compelling in 2016. So in terms of business models, business models are under attack in terms of the percentage of revenue that comes from traditional ARPU is declining fairly steadily each and every year and being replaced by other subsidized services. And you can see an example of that with Google-Fi coming out with a Wi-Fi first product with an MVNO behind it, launched by Google. Google, of course, has other revenue streams, other interests besides just being a carrier. And that's one example of many, and I think especially in IoT, Internet of Things, we'll see other business models emerge as we go into the year. So ARPU, we didn't have, I don't think we'll have a prediction on it in particular, but the traditional monthly ARPU-based model is changing fairly rapidly.
Yeah, and Perry, George mentioned IoT there, and we're not too far away from a future where everything in our lives is going to have a cellular subscription and be producing data. And at current rates, I am not inclined to buy my tennis shoes a data plan. So Perry, how are these business models going to change to facilitate this explosive growth in data that we're creating?
Well, thanks. Lots of different thoughts on that. But I like to boil things down to two basic philosophies. One is pain, and the second one is passion. If you can eliminate a pain, you solve a problem. If you have something that someone's passionate about, customers are passionate about it, they're willing to pay for it. If they're not so passionate about it, they may not be, willing to pay for it. So my kind of themes, and it doesn't quite fit exactly what you were saying, but there are some real key themes that I think are pains in the wireless space. One is the bottleneck to the cell tower to cover all the different data usage, video usage, as George referred to. And there's some important things that need to be done in terms of backhaul and backhauling to a data center, what have you. An example of a company trying to solve that is Tower Cloud here in Atlanta that's trying to help solve that problem. The second is high traffic venues, especially high traffic venues that are high traffic for very short periods of times, convention centers, stadiums, what have you. And I think one of the key themes there is a lot of small cell and DAS and companies that are taking on that challenge. An example of that is Connectivity Wireless here in town. So those are some of the things. Internet of Things is all part of that. I have 3 kids, trust me. I think they'd rather have wireless in every single device that they ever touch. It may happen someday, but I'm with you. Hope it's all in one bundled plan and fairly reasonable.
All right, and Jeff, I've heard you say and use many times in some of your writings this analogy of the growth wave that rises, crests, and then falls. What's this wave going to look like over the next few years as we continue to introduce new wireless services into the marketplace?
Well, we have to recognize, and I think we all recognize because this is the business that we're in, and many of us have been in this business for a long time. I've been doing this for, I think, close to 30 years. We watch every 5 to 10 years the industry change, go through another transformation, go through another wave of change. The last major wave was when the Apple iPhone and the Google Android came out, and that was somewhere around 8 years ago. Before that, BlackBerry and Nokia were leading, and they then suddenly they struggled to survive. And that was a major change with apps and the growth of smartphones. And now we've risen, we've crested, and that growth wave is now slowing. Smartphones aren't going away. We're going to be using them forever. But it's not like we don't have them. We've been using them for a while. So the rapid growth wave is ending. And we're now starting on the next major transformation of the industry. And I'm not saying something that everyone in this room doesn't know. We all know the industry is starting to go through another major transformation where wireless, and we happen to be in the center of the universe, wireless is going to be the industry that's going to transform other industries. Other industries like automotive, like healthcare, like retail, industry after industry after industry are moving into wireless, and it's transforming what they do at the dashboard of the car. You know, if you're driving even a Toyota, you know, you all of a sudden you get a signal on the dashboard. It's time to update your GPS and your navigation software. Do you want to do it now? Well, I'm driving, so I press the button, yes, and it's downloading to my car while I'm driving. So, you know, it takes 20 minutes, and then it transforms what I have on my screen, and now it's better and bigger. And this is continuing to transform. Now we're going into this new wireless TV space, which I think is going to be a very exciting area. And wireless TV is going to transform the way we think about cable TV. We always thought about cable TV as just coming home, grabbing the remote control, and flipping the channels. But going forward, you know, the TV providers have to deliver more than just TV over a cable line to the home. They have to deliver it wirelessly. They have to deliver it to the smartphone, to the tablet. You've got to be able to watch television on your devices over the wireless network wherever you are, whether that's in your home or somewhere else in the city or somewhere else in the country. So it's transforming the way we are experiencing that industry. Now, some carriers are jumping on that. AT&T with DirecTV. DirecTV and Dish were both struggling because they had grown, but they were not growing anymore because they only offered service to the home. But now, DirecTV, through AT&T, is offering a wireless connection. So all of a sudden, DirecTV is growing. Now, Dish has a dilemma. Dish has to come up with the same kind of wireless programming opportunity in order for them to continue to grow. Comcast, you know, is told Verizon Wireless in the last week or two that they're now going to be working closely with them to develop their own and enhance their own wireless TV offerings. So, you know, going forward, this is a huge opportunity for every wireless carrier and every cable television and every IPTV television company, because it's transforming. And these kinds of transformations are all about wireless. We happen to be in the center of the universe. Everybody in every industry needs us. And whether we are going to be working in the wireless industry and providing these services with the companies that we work for, or whether we look to other opportunities in other industries, because these other companies and these other industries don't have a clue how to integrate wireless, but they need to, because in the beginning, the first few companies that do it are going to have a competitive advantage. But after a while, when everybody starts to offer it, it's not going to be a competitive advantage anymore. It's going to be expected. It's going to be what companies have to deliver, otherwise they're going to struggle. So with that said,
yeah, video content delivery is a huge issue right now, and I think you touched on it, George, in your opening remarks around network convergence. Perhaps would be a good thing to call that, which I recently got an education in at the Cable Tech Expo. I was down there on the show floor having discussions with various people, and after a while it was hard to tell if someone worked for a telecom company or for a cable company, nigh indistinguishable. But George, what are the business opportunities presented by network convergence, and what are the challenges to capitalizing on those opportunities?
So there are tremendous opportunities, and the need is really twofold. If you right now polled users in America as to what their belief, what their ratings are around in-building coverage, it's still not great, right? We still have challenges in building. I was just in New York City this week, and I'm always surprised how poor wireless is there for the obvious reasons. And when you think about coverage in smaller areas, it's a little bit of an alphabet soup at this point. We had DAS systems that were put into stadiums, which had a purpose. We've got Wi-Fi We have small cell that hasn't quite emerged as quickly as people would like. And then now, also in the category of unlicensed spectrum, there's what's called the LTE unlicensed, and there's families associated with that. Many of you have probably looked at that with regards to how that could interact or not interact with Wi-Fi. So you've got lots of different ways to provide a solution for this pain point. And this sort of takes me to the next wave, which is 5G. And 5G is going to be really different than the first 4Gs. The first 4Gs, everything was sort of better. 1G, 2G, 3G, 4G. 5G, in terms of its first instance, will be very much focused on the smallest of the small cell type technologies. It'll be very, very fast. It'll have very low latency, but it's not going to be sort of your high and wide type service. But it'll be amazing for video, and it'll be a true. It'll be more competitive to fixed broadband than the previous installations of iterations of wireless. So it's very exciting. It's still some time away, but you know, to Perry's point, you know, the innovation and the attention is all going to be around densification and smaller coverage areas.
Yeah, and Perry, small cells, that's something you and I were discussing a little bit before we got up here. I was recently looking at some research out of the Small Cell Forum, and the point of it was that the growth opportunity in the short term is in the enterprise market, not in the carrier market. And I think we've thought that carrier deployments were going to take off for a couple years at this point, but it still seems in the distance. Why is that, and why is the enterprise market a great growth opportunity for small cells?
Well, I think that's an interesting point. I think in an enterprise, and just widely defined, an enterprise could be, you know, all of us bring your own devices there, and I might be on one carrier, Jeff might be on another, George might be on another, and you want to be able to accommodate all. So that's why I don't think it's as carrier-centric. And again, going back to, and I've done some work with a lot of companies in this space trying to deploy DAS and small cell, and they are really focused in on the enterprise, or call it the stadium, or the group space that a lot of people are going to be in, and they want to have that independent neutral, almost like the tower space as it emerged, coming from, you know, carrier-centric to independent parties like SBA and Crown Castle and all that. You're almost seeing that, where in the enterprise or these venues, you want one neutral party to make it available to multiple parties. I think it's two reasons. Number one, the carriers don't really have the time to deal with it. Number two, the economics of, you know, sharing that common core infrastructure will make it much more palatable to have an independent third party do it and have the carriers share it versus one independent carrier or one separate carrier do it themselves.
And if I could ask you a follow-up question to that, you mentioned stadiums, which is, I think, what a lot of people associate with DAS and small cell, but there's this huge, I think Solid Technologies calls it the middle prize, hotels, 500,000 square foot and less venues where this is a good fit. Tell me how the public safety mandates that we see being formulated in the FCC, it seems to me this is a huge opportunity for small cell.
Sure, I think, you know, like you said, you know, it could be any of many uses, and certainly public safety is one. And, you know, everyone's talked about how in certain emergency situations, public safety people have not been able to communicate with each other and all that. You know, in certain areas where, whether it be like a hotel or a large office building, what have you. So this certainly could be, again, a common platform that could be used, and FCC, like in so many different situations, would make sure that the public safety folks have access to it. And I think that makes sense from public policy standpoint.
And Jeff, from a carrier perspective, I think when we talk about small cells, we talk so much about Sprint because we're excited to see what that strategy is going to be. Is it going to be 50,000 units? Is it going to be 70,000 units? And I think a little bit of the attention got taken off of that yesterday when they announced that their new promotion to cut your rate plan in half as you switch. So Jeff, from your perspective, is that a good move for Sprint to gain back market share that they might have lost, or do they also need to go forward with a massive and costly network improvement plan?
Good question. I see the wireless industry splitting into two separate segments. You've got AT&T Mobility and Verizon Wireless on one side, which offers wireless as part of a bundle or part of a group of services which interact with each other. And they're moving into other industries, and they're moving into many other growth areas. And then you've got the other segment, which is Sprint and T-Mobile, which are wireless-only plays. And that's what they market to, and that's what they deliver. Sprint, we all know the story about Sprint and T-Mobile over the last decade, how they all both just crashed and burned. And then John Laguerre took over with T-Mobile and has reinvigorated it. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that going forward, whether that continues or whether that starts to slow. But Sprint had a late start compared to T-Mobile. They just, they have transformation with the CEO and all the executives, and they're not interested at this point. They've got plenty of spectrum. They're not really interested in going to these auctions and because they've got what they need. They've got more spectrum than T-Mobile. T-Mobile has very little spectrum, and Sprint has tons of spectrum. What they have to do is they have to reinvigorate. They've got to throw some gasoline on the sparks, on the fire, to reignite the fire. I think that we're going to see both of these segments grow. I think AT&T and Verizon are going to continue to grow in their area, and that's going to be different from the way Sprint and T-Mobile are going to grow on the wireless-only side. So Sprint is still, I don't know if you guys are Sprint customers, if you've tried Sprint. They, 10 years ago, they were one of the competitors. 5 years ago, they sucked. The quality was just horrible. Over the course of the last 5 years, they've been making major investments, and they've been improving it. It just takes a while for the marketplace to understand. The quality of the service is much better today than it ever was over the course of Sprint history. Not in every cell, not in every city, but they're building. They're continuing to build it out. So Sprint is going in the right direction. But T-Mobile got a head start on it. I think Sprint is going to be following T-Mobile's growth wave. And the question is, what's that growth wave going to look like a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years from now? I think they're still going to be in the wireless space, but there's other opportunities. We talked about it, I mentioned this earlier with wireless television. There's a lot of cable television companies, and there's a lot of companies that are out there that are providing television either over cable TV or IPTV, or also over the internet with all these smaller providers. And they need a wireless option. They need a wireless way of delivering their signal. I don't know whether one wireless carrier is going to be the answer, or whether all of the wireless carriers are going to offer something to this segment. But that's a great opportunity for a company like Sprint, or all of them. So I think you're going to see a lot of growth and a lot of change and a lot of transformation with all of these companies over the course of the next year to 5 years. I think Sprint is actually in a very good position, even though they're struggling to recapture their market share the way T-Mobile was 5 years ago. I think if we look ahead a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I think they're going to get better and stronger, each year.